Hi guys, good evening. I am Ilangovan, Axi.com online resource personnel for zoology. So last class we started the reproductive process in human beings. In that one I concluded the reproductive system of male, and also I started the female reproductive system, under which we have concluded about the ovaries, the tube system. So the tube system includes the fallopian tube, the conducting system for that is the egg, and also the place of fertilization. Then we have the uterus, then the cervix, the mouth of the uterus, and vagina, and both the cervix and vagina together constitute the birth canal. And into the uterus, actually, the fallopian tube opens. Normally, the uterus is actually inverted pear shape, formed of three layers, and it is a place of development. You know that when the embryonic development of the individual is taking place mainly in the uterus at the womb of the mother, and for that only it is somewhat specialized. It is a three-layer. The outermost layer is called the serous layer, actually formed of a thin membranous layer of connective tissue. Then the next one we have the myometrium, the muscular layer formed of smooth muscles, highly contractile nature, and its stronger contraction is responsible for the delivery of the babies, or simply just actually the expulsion of the fetus. And the innermost layer, that is the functional layer of the uterus, actually it is a mucous membrane, also called as the endometrium, in which only we have a number of changes taking place. A number of changes taking place during the menstrual cycle and also during the pregnancy period. That is why it's considered as actually the functional layer formed of mucous membrane, epithelial cells, and glands, which are capable of undergoing proliferation during the process of menstrual cycle. So these are all the three different layers which are greatly modified for holding the embryo during the embryonic development. Then we'll see the diagram later. Then the last part of the female reproductive system, what we have the external genitalia, by which one can able to differentiate the male and female individuals. So these are all concerned with the secondary sexual characters. Number one, mons pubis, a kind of fatty tissue just is extending from anterior to the posterior side, covered with the membrane is actually skin inside, and over which we have the hairs, what are called the pubic hairs. And then two folds of skin, one is larger and another one is smaller. The larger folds of skin is called as labia majora, and the smaller one is called labia minora. Labia majora, labia minora. And also another membrane normally partially closing the vaginal opening at the orifice, what is called as the hymen. And finally the sensitive part, what is called as a clitoris, comparable to the male reproductive, just to the organ, that is the external organ, genital organ, namely the penis. Now let's see one by one the various structures related to the external genital organ. So I mentioned earlier, this mons pubis is nothing but a cushion of fatty tissue. I'll show you in the diagram later. Situated anteriorly, normally covered by a skin, and over which we have the hairs, and that is what is called the pubic hair, because that region is called as a pubis region. Then labia majora, and this labia majora is a fleshy folds of skin normally extended down from the mons pubis and covering the orifice of the vagina, or the opening of the vagina, normally the thing with the birth canal. So these are all the folds of skin concerned with actually just closing the vaginal orifice. And the next one, just actually this labia minora, normally found just below the labia majora, also concerned with actually closing the external genital structures. Then hymen vaginae. So this hymen is the membrane normally found in the case of all virgin people. It is nothing but a mucous membrane just partially covering the opening or closing the opening of the vaginal orifice. But actually it is often torn during the coitus or during the sexual intercourse. But it is not considered actually a reliable indicator for sexual experience or virginity, because in some women it is normally existing even after sexual experience or coitus. So that is why it is not considered as a reliable indicator, actually a source for testing the female whether she is in virgin condition, or in the case of actually any sexual experience or coitus for that girl. So anyway, it is only just meant for simply called as a hymen, a membrane closing. Normally very often it is being torn in the case of female at times of actually coitus, or even the case of female or sports women, this membrane ruptures. That is why it is not considered as a reliable indicator for indicating whether the female is underwent any coitus or sexual intercourse or want to test whether the female is in virgin condition or not. So it is not a reliable indicator. Then the clitoris. So it is normally found just actually at the junction, the anterior junction of the labia minora, the fold of skin, the inner folds of skin. So it is analogous to the penis of male. It is highly sensitive organ. It is normally just found just above the superior place of the excrete opening, or we can say the urethral opening of the female clitoris. It's in the diagram. Now you could see the various structures what I expressed so far. Now this part is the uterine part, and this is nothing but the neck of the uterus, what we call is known as the cervix region. It is proceeding down as the vagina, nothing but the birth canal, and which opens outside by means of this vaginal orifice. So uterus, so you didn't see anything about the fallopian tube here, so uterus, and now we have just actually the neck of the uterus, what we call is known as the cervix region, and there is a passage or birth canal, what we call as the vagina, which opens outside as vaginal orifice. Then the vaginal orifice is covered with the two membranous fold of skin. So this is one fold of skin, the outer one larger, what is called labia majora, and inner one, that one, this is the shaded one, what we have the red color is nothing but the labia minora, and we have the sensory structure, the clitoris, just normally found at the anterior end, where you have the junction of this labia minora. It is comparable to or analogous to the organ in the case of male. That is what we call this one as penis, the male copulating organ. So actually the conducting system is concerned with actually the transport of the sperm as well as for fertilization process. The uterus is concerned with for holding the embryo during embryogeny or during developmental process. And now this vagina and cervix is concerned with copulation, actually for the reception of the sperm during insemination process, and also there is birth canal at the time of birth. Then the other structures related to normally the rectum, just nearby you have, that is what we call this one the pubic symphysis, a kind of connective tissue joining the two equal halves of the pelvic girdle. So these are all just present in the pelvic region, but no way connected to the female reproductive system. So let's see the uterine part. So now this is the main body, uterine fundus, the main body of uterus is being formed of three layers. The innermost layer, this layer is the functional layer. It's called as the functional layer because various changes, striking changes are taking place, mainly the uterine endometrium during every month of menstrual cycle and also during the pregnancy period for maintaining the embryogeny. That is why it's considered as a functional layer, a mucous membranous layer consisting of many epithelial cells, glands which are capable of undergoing proliferation during the menstrual period and menstrual cycle. Then the next one, actually the myometrium, the middle layer formed of, you see that one, muscles, the smooth muscles, highly contracted nature, and the contraction of which is responsible for the delivery of the baby or parturition or the expulsion of the fetus at the time of birth. Then the perimetrium, it is the outermost layer formed of connective tissue membrane, that is why it's called as a serous layer. So this is serous layer, the middle one is called as a muscular layer, and now the innermost one is called as the, actually the membranous layer, what we call this one, a mucous membranous layer. And other structures what I described so far, you have the conducting system, the fallopian tube. And now the fallopian tube differentiated into just the infundibulum, what is seen already, the ampulla, the enlarged part, isthmus, and also intramural part, the tube that enters into the uterus is called intramural part. So the egg is released by the ovary and collected with the help of these finger-shaped structures, what we call this one as a fimbriae, and it's being conducted to the ampulla region. And fertilization occurs normally at the junction of isthmus and ampulla. So isthmic ampulla junction is a place of actually the fertilization process. You'll see under the fertilization process. So these are all the structures related to the female reproductive system. Now let's see actually one more structure related to the female reproductive system in cooperation with or in integration with the female reproductive system. We have a structure for making the mother to supply milk to the child. So it is nothing but the integral part of the female reproductive system, though it is only concerned with the secretion of milk after delivery. But it is an integrated part with the female reproductive system and structurally and functionally support the various events happening during the lifetime of an individual. For example, fertilization, and before that we have the ovulation process. So it is concerned with actually related to the various events like ovulation process, fertilization process. We have pregnancy followed by you have the childbirth, and afterwards you have the child care. So the child needs milk. It is to be actually supplied with milk, and also it is to be just actually protected from various microorganisms. That means we have to provide immunity to the child also, and that is also provided by the secretion of the mammary gland. So anyway, it is a structurally and functionally to support the various events happening in the female body, ovulation process, fertilization, then we have the pregnancy, birth, and also the child care. Now we have a pair of glands, and these glands normally consist of two parts or two important cells. One, the fatty tissue, variable amount of fatty tissue, and also the glandular cells for secreting the milk. So mainly there are two components in the mammary glands, one concerned with the secretion of milk, another one concerned with actually providing just protection to the glandular tissue, namely the fatty tissue. It is of variable amount. Now the glandular tissues are arranged in the form of what we call is one just actually mammary lobes, the mammary lobes. So nearly about 15 to 20 mammary lobes are present inside each mammary gland. And these mammary lobes are actually formed of cluster or groups of cells, which together constitute what we call this one alveoli, as in the case of lungs. Some bubble-like structures which are concerned with the secretion of milk are formed, and all these structures normally together form the mammary gland. Now normally the cells, the mammary glands, you know that when they are examples for apocrine glands. Apocrine glands, here the secretions are actually collected at the tip of the cell. The cell is being bedded off at its tip, and the secretions are released. That's about the nature of this apocrine glands. So the mammary glands are apocrine glands in secretion. That means the secretions are by means of budding of the membrane of the cell without any damage to the cell. So nothing would happen to the cell. The cell secretes by budding of its anterior or apical portion without any damage to the cell. So that is one type of actually gland in terms of its function, apocrine. So mammary glands are example for an apocrine, and it's also modified. It is a modified sebaceous gland. We have one type of gland found in the skin, responsible for secreting an oily secretion, and that is responsible for actually keeping the skin from, preventing the skin from dryness, and that is what we call this one, the sebaceous gland, which secretes an oily secretion. So in due course, during the embryogeny, what will happen? It gets modified into mammary glands. So mammary glands are modified sebaceous glands. The skin gland is one of the glands found in the skin. Now let's see the structure of this mammary gland. Now actually the cells and alveoli, it is nothing but a cluster. The cells secrete the milk. The milk is stored in the lumen of the alveoli. So the alveolar gland just somewhat like this, actually lined with the cells. This is the alveolus. These are all the cells concerned with the secretion. The secretion is collected here, what is called as a lumen of the alveolus. So from the lumen of the alveoli, actually there are small tubules, what we call this one, the mammary tubules originate, and many tubules join together to form the mammary ducts, and several mammary ducts are joined to just what is called one part, ampulla, at the tip of what is called the mammary gland, where you have a swollen part which is normally coming from, that is what we call from the mammary duct, where the milk is stored for a while before it is being released, and this ampulla is connected to lactiferous duct, which is the one which is opening at the tip of the nipple through which the milk is sucked out. So the secretion of milk is normally a hormonal process. The secretion of milk is a hormonal process, and that process is called lactation process or lactogenesis process. Lactation or lactogenesis. But the ejection of the milk is actually neuroendocrine process. Neuroendocrine process. So secretion is purely hormonal. The release of the milk or the ejection of the milk from the lactating breast after delivery is because of mainly the neurohormonal reflex. So the hormone oxytocin is responsible for the ejection of the milk, and at the same time it is a suckling process of the young one that stimulates actually the release of the milk. So that is why I said it is a neurohormonal reflex. Both the nervous system and hormonal system are involved in releasing the milk or the ejection of the milk. The hormone normally involved in the injection of the milk is nothing but the oxytocin hormone. Now we see that one, this is actually the structure. It is being formed of many mammary lobes. I mentioned 15 to 20 mammary lobes. And each mammary lobe we have just what we call this one, these box-like structures. They represent the alveoli. And each alveolus is concerned with actually the secretion of the milk made up of many cells. And from that one, the milk is carried away by means of mammary tubules, and these tubules join together to form what we call this one, this is the mammary duct. And each mammary duct is dilated to form an ampulla where the milk is stored for a short while, and each one is connected to the lactiferous duct, and through the opening spot on the nipple region, the milk is actually sucked out by the suckling process of the young one. Now just actually the darkened pigmented area surrounding the nipple is called areola. This is because of the estrogen hormone secretion and also more melanin pigmentation around the nipple region, and that area is called areola. So we have to combine this one in connection with the female reproductive system because it is related to the ovulation process, the fertilization process, the pregnancy process, the parturition of the childbirth process, and also at the events after pregnancy along with childbirth and what we call this one, the child care. So with this I concluded about the first part of the reproductive system. We have concluded the spermatogenesis, oogenesis, the male reproductive system and female reproductive system. Now let's proceed further. The main part of reproductive system concerned with the reproductive nature. What we call this one, the reproductive cycle in the case of female. So the menstrual cycle. So actually one of the important characteristic features of the female reproductive system, the presence of cyclic changes that happens to occur in the ovary as well as in the uterine wall, and that is the main characteristic feature of the female reproductive system. Whether the female is actually under menstrual cycle or under reproductive cycle or in the state of pregnancy. So everything to be known only because of the cycle, what is happening rhythmically just in every month. During every month there are some changes that are taking place, what we call this one rhythmical changes, either in the uterine wall or in the ovary. So collectively what we call this one, the sexual cycle or the reproductive cycle. Now we can say actually the reproductive cycle is well developed in the case of primates, ordered primates, under which human beings are included. So we are included under one order primate subclass Mammalia, primates, which includes normally apes, chimpanzees, monkeys, human beings, even the lemurs, tortoises, etc. So these are all the different groups of animals included under this category, the primates. So they will exhibit the two reproductive cycle, the sexual cycle, continuously throughout the year. But in the case of other mammals, there is also sexual cycle, but it is not happening, that is throughout the year. It is happening only during the breeding season. So we have two different types of cycle. In the case of order primates, we have a sexual cycle that is happening throughout the year. Perennial nature, continuously, every month we have the reproductive cycle. But in the case of animals, for example, cows, dogs, etc., they are not included under the primates. Even the case of lions and tigers. So they have a cycle. Even the case of small animals, say an example of rat or mouse, or even the case of shrew. In all cases, in the case of rabbit also, excepting the primates order. Human beings, chimpanzees, that is the gorillas, that is commonly known as, that one, the apes, tortoises, lemurs, and these are all the animals coming into the category of primates. So all of the animals exhibit a sexual cycle. The name of the sexual cycle is called as estrus cycle. The meaning for estrus is heat, the heat period. So that is also called as a sexual heat. Estrus is otherwise called as sexual heat or heat. So the estrus cycle occurs only during breeding season. But the sexual cycle, namely the menstrual cycle, occurs once in every month in the case of the ordered primates, the animals included under this category. So what do you mean by actually estrus cycle? I mentioned already it is normally occurring in the case of non-primate females other than primates, like cows, dogs, rabbits, even the case of, for example, small animal, cat, or that is mouse, rat, etc. And I mentioned earlier, it happens to occur only during the breeding season, not throughout the year. When the animal is reproducing, at times only you have the period, what is called the estrus cycle. The meaning for the estrus cycle, what we call this one, estrus or sexual heat. When it occurs at the time of ovulation, at the time of ovulation, the animal actually having the development of the ovary mature. When the egg is going or about to be released from the ovary, at times of ovulation only, what we have the sexual heat or estrus period or estrus cycle. So what is the reason for that one? During that period, the level of estrogen hormone has been increasing steadily. So when it increases in the body, it produces more heat. It makes the female increasing its sexual urge so that it is ready for copulation. So the animal is ready to receive the male for coitus only at times of breeding season once it has a estrus or sexual heat. So at this time there is a strong sex urge, what I mentioned in the case of female animal. At times only it allows the male for coitus during the estrus period. So there is no menstrual flow in the case of estrus cycle, unlike the menstrual cycle. So in the case of menstrual cycle, you know that when there is a menstrual flow caused because of the breakdown of the innermost layer of the uterus, what is seen the endometrium, along with the blood vessels. But here there is no menstrual flow. Simply the thickening of the uterus occurs, concerned with the reception of the sperm and the egg for fertilization, an embedding of the fertilized egg occurs, and further development is taking place. So don't forget, it occurs only during the breeding season. It never occurs throughout actually the life cycle of the individual throughout the year. So there is no menstrual flow also. Now in contrast to this one, it's a primitive method of what we call this one the reproductive cycle. So in contrast to this one, we have in the case of primates, what I mentioned, the reproductive cycle, the menstrual cycle. So the reproductive cycle in the female of primates, example what I mentioned earlier, is called as a sexual cycle. So normally the sexual cycle begins at the time of puberty. Once the menstrual cycle being started, and that period is called as a puberty period and is called menarche. So always it occurs between menarche to menopause. The sexual cycle always occurs from menarche to menopause. So menarche, the starting of the menstrual cycle, and menopause, the stoppage of the menstrual cycle at the age of 40, sorry, at the age of 50, it varies. Normally, average age 50. So the sexual cycle in the case of females, that is in the human females, occurs between menarche and menopause, and between which some cyclic changes are taking place both in the ovary as well as in the uterus, and that accounts for the female is ready for what is called receiving the sperm at any time. So the female, normally what will happen, that is the puberty occurs because of the hormonal imbalance or because of a hormonal, what we can say, the stimulation. We can have changes occurring in the uterine endometrium as well as in the ovary, to begin with the formation of the follicles in which the ovary are developing, and also some changes are taking place in the uterine endometrium for the reception of the fertilized egg, etc. So we'll see one by one. So the puberty, when you have the starting part of the menstrual cycle, is called as a menarche. So actually what we call this one the period. The period between just actually the period, the concrete period for one menstrual cycle. So the period or the time interval between just what is called the starting from one menstruation till the next one is called what is known as a menstrual cycle. So between two menstruation, so this is not the menstrual cycle, the menstruation, the bleeding phase, what we call this one the bleeding phase. So the duration of the time interval between two menstruation periods is called as a menstrual cycle. That is why here is also given the cycle of events starting from one menstruation till the next menstruation together constitute the menstrual cycle. Now what is the duration of the menstrual cycle? We are saying roughly that is 1 month, so it is about 28 to 29 days. The actual menstrual cycle, the duration is about 28 to 29 days, though we are calling this one month the duration. So what will happen during that period? Some changes are taking place in the ovary as well as in the uterine endometrium. So actually the egg is released. What we call this one, the release of the egg from the ovary, called the ovulation process. It occurs normally the middle part, the mid-cycle of that menstrual cycle. The mid-cycle, or we can say middle part of the menstrual cycle, exactly on the 14th day. So the 14th day starting from the day of menstruation is the stage at which actually the egg is released, and that phenomenon is called ovulation. Don't forget, the ovulation always occurs just normally on 14th. So normally the fertilization happens to occur between the 11th to 18th day, and that is considered as a green period or the red period. So the natural method of barrier to prevent fertilization, just avoiding coitus between 11th to 17th day during each menstrual cycle, because the womb is ready. So it varies according to the people, according to the nature of the body, according to the stress, according to, for example, the health conditions. That is why we can say there is a red period between there is 11th to 17th, starting from the first day of menstruation, and during which at any stage fertilization is possible. So there is a natural method to prevent what we call this one, the pregnancy. So anyway, the womb is released on every 14th of every cycle. That day is called as the ovulation day. Now, what are the changes happening during that one? So I mentioned just actually, see the menstrual cycle. What are the major events of menstrual cycle? So starting with the bleeding phase, what we call this one, the menstrual phase, it is lasting for 3 to 5 days, the duration. So in some books it is given what's the first stage, the follicular phase, the next one the luteal phase, and finally the menstrual phase. So anyway, it is a starting phase. At the end of one menstrual cycle, we are starting the menstrual phase, that is a bleeding phase. It lasts about 3 to 5 days. So the cycle starts with what is called actually the menstrual phase, when menstrual flow occurs. The day of menstrual flow is considered as the first day of that menstrual cycle. The day of the menstrual flow through the vaginal orifice is considered as the first day of the menstrual cycle. So once the menstrual flow starts, then we can conclude that the menstrual cycle, the previous menstrual cycle came to an end, and now just we have started the next cycle. So this is the meaning for that one. So what is the reason for the menstrual flow? So this is the identification that one cycle has been completed and another cycle has been started. So it results, the menstrual flow is due to the breakdown of the uterine endometrium. So during the previous cycle, what will happen? Some striking changes are taking place in the endometrium. The endometrium actually becomes thickened and acts as a cushion, acts as a bed for receiving the fertilized egg. If fertilization occurs, there is no menstrual flow, there is no menstrual cycle once again. If there is no fertilization, what will happen? The released egg, along with the uterine endometrium, the one which is being broken, along with the ruptured blood vessels, all being released out as menstrual flow. That is the indication of the end of one menstrual cycle and the beginning of the next menstrual cycle. So when one cycle ends, we have normally there is a rupture and the release of the menstrual flow, and also we are commencing or starting the next cycle. Then I mentioned already, menstruation only occurs if the released womb is not fertilized. You just remember that one, menstruation only occurs if the released womb is not fertilized. So if the egg is fertilized, what will happen? It is getting embedded on the wall of the uterus. So it undergoes further development. There is no further menstrual flow, there is no menstrual cycle until the pregnancy has been completed, the child has been delivered. So that is an indication that whether the mother is already there or she is in condition of reproductive cycle, whether she is already having the child, that is in the womb of the lady, then we can say then only there is the pregnancy occurs, there is no menstrual flow. So that is why it's considered the indication whether the mother or whether the female is in pregnant condition or still in just what we call this one in non-pregnant condition. So if you have if you have no menstrual cycle, it may be because of an indication of pregnancy. That is number one. But in some cases, if the female is not under normal health conditions, or if she is always in a tension mood, or she is always in a stress. So this is also one of the reasons why there is no menstrual flow. So menstrual flow once absent, so the lack of that one is an indicative measure for pregnancy. In some cases, in the case of female, she is actually not in good health condition, or she is always in a tension mode, or she is always in a stress condition. In such cases, we have also there is no menstrual flow. This is because of the hormonal imbalance. The hormone is the main one responsible for the menstrual cycle. We can see actually the various hormones, already the 4 major hormones are taking part in just maintaining the pregnancy, the menstrual flow or the menstrual cycle, etc. Now the first stage is actually lasting for 3 to 5 days. During that one, what will happen? We have the menstrual flow. This is because of the decline of 2 hormones. There are 2 hormone levels are being declined. One, the estrogen hormone, another one, progesterone. When the levels of these 2 hormones have been decreased or have been declined, then ultimately the rupture of the endometrium and also the rupture of the blood vessels occur. The peeling process happens to occur because of the decline of these 2 hormones, and those hormones are responsible for maintaining the pregnancy somehow. So once there is no actually pregnancy, ultimately we have the menstruation. So we have to begin the next cycle. So the next cycle starts with the menstrual period, what we call this one the menstrual phase or menstruation, and simply it is called as menses, lasting about just 3 to 5 days. In some cases it is about 3 to 7 days also. And it is followed by the next stage of the cycle, what we call this one the follicular phase. This follicular phase is also called as proliferative phase. The follicular phase is also called as a proliferative phase. So the follicular phase is called so because the growth of the follicles occur in the ovary. It's also called as proliferative phase because the proliferation of the glandular cells occurs in the uterine endometrium. That is why it's called as a proliferative phase. So we have the follicular phase, the growth of the follicle in the ovary, and also called proliferative phase because it's concerned with the proliferation of the various glands located in the uterine endometrium, that is the mucus layer. That is why it's called proliferative phase. So it lasts roughly about 10 days. It lasts roughly about 10 days. The duration is from that is 5th to that is 14th day. From 5th to 14th day, follicular phase. So it follows the menstrual phase. So what is happening during that one? I mentioned already 2 main events are happening, one in the ovary, another one in the uterine endometrium. So what is happening in the ovary? So the primary follicle starts developing. So I mentioned during oogenesis process we have primary, secondary, tertiary follicles, and finally the mature follicle, what we can see, the Graafian follicle. So the primary follicles in the ovary grow to become a fully matured Graafian follicle. So primary, secondary, tertiary, and finally what we have received, the fully matured Graafian follicle. So inside which the developing oocyte is there, it is also growing. It is ready for ovulation process, the next stage. So that is number one, a main change, a striking change happening in the ovary is nothing but that is the growth of the primary follicles. And once the follicles are developing, what will happen? These follicles with their cells, what we call this one, the follicle cells release large amount of estrogen hormone. So the predominant ovarian hormone during the follicular phase is estrogen. The major hormone which is actually found steadily increasing. So that is why I said actually the predominant ovarian hormone during the follicular phase is nothing but the estrogen hormone. Another hormone is being secreted gradually, it is increasing towards what will happen, that is the mid-cycle of the follicular phase, what we call this one, just actually the mid-cycle of the menstrual cycle, not the follicular phase, namely the 14th day, one hormone level has been increased at a peak level. So anyway, the ovarian hormone, the predominant ovarian hormone during the follicular phase is estrogen. Then on day of 14, another hormone being increased, that is what we call this one LH surge. So that is strong increase, the level of another hormone is normally taking place, will come later. So anyway, the estrogen is a predominant ovarian hormone that is being released by the follicle cells of the ovary. So first event during the follicular phase, just what we say actually, the development of the follicles and the release of the estrogen hormones by the follicle cells for maintaining the menstrual cycle. So at the same time, some striking changes are also taking place in the uterine endometrium. What will happen? The endometrium increases in thickness. It is about very few millimeter in thickness to begin with. Now its size, its thickness increases steadily. This is because of what we call this one, the proliferation of that is the mucus secreting glands and also epithelial cells. That means already this endometrium last in the previous cycle is start regenerating. So in the previous cycle I mentioned just the endometrium is peeled off because of the ending of the previous cycle. Now once again the one which is start regenerating from the deeper part of the uterine layer. So the uterine endometrium starts regenerating from the deeper part. Then the glands and the cells are undergoing proliferation to increase the thickness of the uterine endometrium. So altogether we have two changes, one in ovary, another one just in the uterine endometrium, and both are caused because of the hormonal effect. Now what will happen? Just two ovarian hormones and two anterior pituitary hormones responsible for making such changes in the uterine endometrium as well as in that is ovary, and these hormones are two from anterior pituitary, what we call this one follicular stimulating hormone, another one luteinizing hormone. The other two are actually the ovarian hormones, progesterone and estrogen. So the first two are secreted by the anterior pituitary. The remaining two are called as ovarian hormones. The reason for that one, they are being secreted by the ovary, the follicle cells or some other structures. For example, progesterone is secreted by one structure after ovulation process, what we call this one corpus luteum. So anyway, four hormones found to play a major role during the menstrual cycle, two from anterior pituitary and two from the ovaries. So all these changes are because of these four hormones only. Now, the FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary normally called as a gonadotropins. You know that one. FSH and LH are considered as a gonadotropins because they are concerned with actually the stimulation of the gonads to do some activities, hence the common name, that is gonadotropins. So their level gradually increases, both FSH and LH. Then on day 14 normally the egg is released, and that is because of the effect of the LH hormone. So that is why it is called as an ovulatory hormone. So the process of release of the egg from the ovary is called ovulation. That is being brought about by this luteinizing hormone. LH is other is called luteinizing hormone in female, and that is why it is also called ovulatory hormone, as it brings the effect of ovulation, the release of the egg from the ovary. And now this FSH is the follicle stimulating hormone, and that is responsible for the growth of the follicle. So the level of FSH is gradually increasing. The level of LH is also gradually increasing. On day 14, the level of LH is normally LH just level is reaching the peak, a stronger secretion of this LH, and that is the one responsible for the rupture of the follicle to release the egg. And at the same time, the FSH level ceases. There is no more FSH secretion is needed for. Actually, if it is there, what will happen? Another follicle will develop, another egg will be developed, and another egg will actually be released from the ovary. That is to be avoided. So at a time only one egg is released, and for that only up to the 14th day the FSH level is increasing, and also LH level is increasing gradually. On day 14 the LH reaches the peak level because it is the one responsible for the rupture of the follicle to release the egg. That process called ovulation, and this FSH is responsible for the growth of the follicle. So no more FSH, LH is needed after ovulation process. Otherwise, what we have, other follicle will develop because of the effect of these two hormones. So, and these two normally gradually increases during this phase and stimulate one, the follicular development. Another one, just also the secretion of estrogen. So the secretion of estrogen is stimulated because of the effect of these two hormones. Because estrogen is a ovarian hormone that is being released by the follicle cells, whereas these two hormones are from anterior pituitary. So they stimulate the growth of the follicle. At the same time, when the follicle is growing, from the growing follicle, the hormone estrogen is released for normal maintenance of the sexual cycle. So I mentioned already, both FSH and LH attain a peak level in the middle cycle of the menstrual cycle, about on 14th day. Because we need badly the hormone LH for the rupture of the follicle to release the egg from the ovary. That is why that hormone is called as the ovulatory hormone. The 14th day is called as the ovulation day. So rapid secretion of LH, what will happen leading to its maximum level during the mid-cycle call, it is known as LH surge. There is nothing but large amount. So secretion or peak level of that hormone reaches on day 14. And because of that surge level of LH hormone, what will happen? It induces the follicle, namely the graphene follicle, to rupture. So the graphene follicle is normally having the egg just completed only the first meiotic division. It completed only the first meiotic division. The second meiotic division happens to occur only by the touch of the spore. So, and thereby, actually what will happen? So at the time of fertilization only it has to complete, it completes its second meiotic division to form what is called the fully developed egg for fertilization process. So anyway, the egg is released at time of ovulation, just completed only the first meiotic division. So now by the rupture of the follicle, the egg is released, and that phenomenon is called ovulation process. So at the time of ovulation, the egg has completed only the first reproduction division. Now it is called the secondary oocyte stage. So the egg is released on secondary oocyte stage from the ovulation process or from the ovary. Now the third phase, what we call this one as a luteal phase. So it is also called pre-gestational phase. Pre-gestational phase. Also called as premenstrual phase. Premenstrual phase. So three names for that one. Why is called as luteal phase? Because during that period there is one structure developed in the ovary, what we call this one as corpus luteum, the one responsible for maintaining the pregnancy period. See that one, the corpus luteum. It is a must for maintaining the pregnancy. If this one is absent, there is no pregnancy at all. The pregnancy is normally maintained because of this gland, what we call this one a transitory endocrine gland, because it's a temporary gland formed only during the pregnancy. Other times it will disappear. So if there is no pregnancy, what will happen? This corpus luteum disappears or degenerates. Only at times of pregnancy, to maintain the pregnancy, there is a structure is developed, what is called corpus luteum, from the ruptured follicle cells. Now that is why it's called as a luteal phase, as we have the formation of corpus luteum. Now why is it called as pre-gestational phase? So gestation means pregnancy. As it occurs just before the onset of pregnancy, it is called pre-gestational phase. And also called premenstrual phase, as it occurs before the onset of menstruation. So if pregnancy occurs, then it is being preceded. So that is why it's called as pre-gestation, as it occurs before pregnancy. And also, and if there is no pregnancy, you know that one we have the menstruation period. As it occurs before menstruation, it is called premenstrual phase. Now what is happening? So on day 14, the egg is released. The day 14, the egg is released, that is called as ovulation day. And what will happen after ovulation? The empty follicle cells. After ovulation, the ruptured follicle, what we call this one, the ruptured graphene follicle, having the follicle cells, get transformed into a transitory endocrine gland, what is called the corpus luteum, because its function is to secrete one hormone, namely progesterone, to maintain the pregnancy. That's why it's called as a pregnancy hormone. Also responsible for maintaining the temperature of the body at times of what is called pregnancy. Thermoregulatory hormone or thermogenic hormone, because it initiates the release of energy by means of heat by increasing the oxidation process. That is also called thermogenic hormone. We will come this later. So this corpus luteum is a structure which is formed from the empty follicle after ovulation. It persists and flourishes and grows and maintained only when pregnancy occurs. If there is no pregnancy, the structure degenerates. It is being absorbed by the ovary, and that is why it's called as transitory endocrine gland. So this is the main structure which is developed during what we call this one, that's a luteal phase, that is with the name. Now this corpus luteum secretes large amount of progesterone, because it is responsible for maintaining the uterine endometrium. That is a place where you have the bed for the embedding of the fertilized egg, for what is called the developing embryo. So the endometrium is considered as a bed for the future embryo. That is why it is being maintained for pregnancy, and that is being maintained with the progesterone. So it is responsible or essential for maintenance of endometrium. necessary for the implantation of the fertilized egg, the one which formed at times of fertilization, the fallopian tube. So what will happen? Another function of this progesterone released with the corpus luteum is to suppress the secretion of estrogen and also suppress the secretion of other hormones, namely for example FSH, even LH. Because if this FSH and LH are there during the pregnancy, then again the menstrual cycle is being started. But there is no menstrual cycle during pregnancy because of the effect of the progesterone. So it is responsible for maintaining the pregnancy by just maintaining the uterine endometrium, and also suppresses the menstruation process by suppressing the activity of LH as well as FSH hormone. So there is no menstrual cycle during pregnancy. This is because of the hormonal effect, namely the progesterone released by corpus luteum. So in the absence of fertilization, what happens? So the corpus luteum occurs only when fertilization and that is followed by pregnancy. If there is no fertilization, if there is no just actually pregnancy, what will happen? The corpus luteum degenerates. It is being left as a scar tissue. So the meaning for scar, non-functional tissue. The name of the non-functional corpus luteum is called what is known as corpus albicans. So corpus luteum, a functional structure, a transitory endocrine gland secreting the hormone progesterone. When it is actually non-functional, then it is called as corpus albicans. At times of what will happen, there is no pregnancy. So it is happening only when there is no pregnancy. At times what will happen, the corpus luteum degenerates and that is being left as a scar tissue, namely corpus albicans. Soon it is being absorbed by the ovary. Now, I mentioned already the menstrual cycle actually starts at puberty, what we call this one the menarche period, and it ends at the age of roughly 50, an average age of 50. And that period where there is no menstrual cycle is called menopause. The menarche, the starting of the menstrual flow, that is at times of puberty, at the time of puberty, and menopause, the ending stage when there is no sexual cycle, and the women together call us the menopause women. There is no sexual cycle, there is no menstrual cycle. So normally in all women we have this menstrual cycle happens to occur from menarche to menopause, from menarche to menopause. So there is no menstrual cycle in the case of young children, and also there is no menstrual cycle after the age of 50. Some women, you know that one, they have menstrual cycle even after the age of 60. That is different. But an average woman, normally we have the menstrual cycle stops at the age of 50. That is called as a menopause stage. Now let's see actually what are the various events happening during, that is a menstrual cycle, to represent the various levels of hormones, both the ovarian hormones as well as the antipituitary hormones, and also what is happening in the ovary as well as. Now the middle one, that this one, what is happening in the ovary. So what is happening in the ovary, that is being represented the middle of the diagram, and what is happening in the uterine endometrium, this is the one, what is happening in the uterine endometrium. And now the upper one, just here you see I mentioned about this FSH and LH. So these are the two predominant, what we call is one, the antipituitary hormones. What is their level? And similarly these two hormones, estrogen and progesterone, these are the two hormones released by actually the ovary. That is why they call as ovarian hormones. And these are all the pituitary hormones. Now see the first one. What about the level of these hormones in the female body's blood? Now just actually this is the midpoint, the 14th day, the middle line, the 14th day, and we have just before that the follicular phase, and this one, what we call this one, the red, that is what is called the menses period or the menstruation, roughly about 3 to 5 days, and after 5 to 14 we have just starting from this one, after this one the follicular phase. From the 15th to 28th, just actually is represented here 29. That is the beginning of the next and the ending of the previous cycle. So the ending and beginning, that is the 29th day. So that means we have every cycle has a duration of 28 days. On 29th day, or just actually even just 28th day or 29th day, we have the next cycle being started, and that is being represented 1. 1 represent the next cycle. Now let's see what about the level of FSH and LH. So during the follicular phase, you see that these two hormones are increasing steadily. Now just actually this LH, the green, and then the FSH, the red. You see that one, there is a gradual increase. On day 14, you see that both the hormones are more or less reaching the maximum level, and that too the LH reaches the peak level. That is what we call this one LH surge, that is production mode. So that is responsible for making the follicle to be ruptured. You see that one, the follicle being ruptured on the day 40, so that the egg is released and the ovulation happens to occur. So because of the increase in level of LH hormone, this LH stimulates the follicle to undergo just what is called rupture, resulting in the release of the egg, that is in the stage of secondary oocyte, and that phenomenon is called ovulation process. This is number one. At the same time, you see the FSH level also, it is also increasing. Then after the follicle being ruptured, once the ovulation occurred, what will happen? The next cycle, the luteal phase. The secrete actually what will happen, you see that one, the two hormones are gradually decreasing. That is, we have the curve more or less flattened. That is, the level is less, more or less less. Somehow is present, but actually not being completely disappeared. We have limited amount, a little amount of these two hormones during the luteal phase. Now, you see, after the rupture of the follicle in the luteal phase, the formation of corpus luteum. This is a corpus luteum which is being developed from this empty follicle. And if fertilization occurs, this corpus luteum is actually persisting. If there is no fertilization, if there is no pregnancy, you see that one regressing corpus luteum, it is being actually decreased. And finally left as a scar tissue, what I mentioned earlier, just actually corpus albicans, corpus luteum. Now this one is corpus albicans. Now this is one. Now about this, actually the ovarian hormone, what about their level? Once again you see the follicular phase. The estrogen hormone is a predominant ovarian hormone. You see the level is gradually increasing from here. That is why I say during the follicular phase the estrogen is the predominant ovarian hormone, and the level of progesterone is almost nil. Almost nil. So it is being secreted only when the corpus luteum is found. You see that one, the level is reaching a peak. When the corpus luteum is there, we have higher level of this hormone progesterone. So progesterone is the predominant ovarian hormone during the luteal phase, and estrogen is the predominant ovarian hormone during the follicular phase. Remember this one. So the estrogen is a predominant ovarian hormone during the follicular phase, and progesterone is the predominant ovarian hormone during the luteal phase. And again, just if you are taking these two hormones together, the hormones from the pituitary, and both the hormones are reaching the peak level on day 40. Remember the level of these hormones. Now that is what I mentioned about the development of follicle, then maturing of follicle, rupture of follicle, development of corpus luteum. So what about the uterine endometrium? You see that one here. See that one, the uterine endometrium is gradually increasing in thickness. To begin with, it is only few millimeter in thickness. Now its thickness has been increasing steadily. If pregnancy occurs, this thickness, the maximum thickness, you see that one is being maintained by this corpus luteum. If pregnancy occurs, the same thickness is persisting, even it is being increased further for providing further actually protection to the developing embryo. If not, what will happen? The endometrium ruptures. It is being actually ruptured. The follicle cells being actually here also ruptured. That's not follicle cells, what I mentioned, the glandular cells. So that the menses starts, the bleeding. Once again, you see that one, the thickness of the endometrium has been diminishing or declining or decreasing. This is because of that is what is happening in the corpus luteum. So one more diagram I show you, just the same one in related in this different manner. The same one. See, this is actually the anterior pituitary secreting this FSH and LH. And these two hormones are released. You know that when the anterior pituitary hormones are released because of the releasing factor from the hypothalamus. Gonadotropin releasing factor, just that is being released by the hypothalamus, that is the one which stimulates the anterior pituitary to secrete the hormones FSH, LH. See that one, the LH level reaching the peak, and this is the midpoint you have, the 14th day. See that one, this is FSH and this is LH. So the LH surges, it reaches a maximum level, and this LH is responsible for ovulation. And at the same time, you see about the two hormones, the same one. This is what is called actually the hormone 1, and this is hormone 2. Now this is the estrogen. The estrogen is a predominant ovarian hormone. This is being released by the follicle cells. The progesterone is also released by actually the ovary, but by the corpus luteum, and both are taking part in maintaining the thickening of the uterine endometrium. So anyway, progesterone is the maximum predominant ovarian hormone during what is called the luteal phase, but little bit amount of estrogen is also secreted by the corpus luteum, and both are interacting together for increasing the thickness. Once the level declines, if there is no fertilization, because of the decline of the progesterone level as well as estrogen level, now the uterine endometrium ruptures. Peeling off, or the peeling of the uterine endometrium ultimately results in what is happening. The next menstrual cycle starts because of the menstrual flow. So anyway, these are all the different events. So don't forget that one, the predominant ovarian hormone during the follicular phase is estrogen, and the predominant ovarian hormone during luteal phase is progesterone. On day 14, the hormone which reaches what is called the surge level, and that is what we have the LH hormone, and the two hormones from the anti-pituitary which are more in concentration during the follicular phase, nothing but the LH and FSH. Now the function of the FSH ceases or stops once or as soon as actually the follicle attains maturity ready for ovulation. The LH level gradually increases and making the follicle to rupture and then releasing what we have the oocyte or the egg in secondary oocyte condition. So these are all the changes happening in the case of menstrual cycle during female. Now here is actually some more illustration. So this is cycle what we have 28 days starting from, just this is the actually cyclic changes. Now this is day 1 and this is day 28. So if there is no fertilization, then what will happen? You have just day 1 to 7 as given here somewhere, just the day duration that is given in different books and different actually statistical data, but normally we can say 3 to 5. So days 1 to 7, that is menstruation. So 3 to 7 days. So now what is happening after that? What days 8 to 11? The lining of the womb, that is the uterine endometrium, thickens in preparation for the egg. Now this is what we call this one the danger period. That is why it is given in the red, the rose one or the pink one. So it is a dangerous period. That means during which only just for natural barrier method to avoid fertilization, to avoid pregnancy, and from 11 to just actually it is given 15. Even we can also include the 16th day. So from 11 to 16th day. So if you don't want to have pregnancy, then you have to avoid this one. That is what we call the coitus process. That is why it is given this red period is normally known as a danger period, to prevent that one just what is called actually the natural process of fertilization, the coitus to be avoided between 11th to 16th day. So the day 14 is thickened further. You see that one, the day 14 is considered as ovulation day. On the day only actually the egg is released. So day 18 to 25, if fertilization has not taken place, what will happen? The corpus luteum just faded away. It degenerates. Then from 26 to 28, now the uterine lining detaches, ready for what is called the release. So leading to the menstruation process. So these are all the different changes happening both in the ovary as well as in what we call this one, that is the uterine endometrium. So these changes together only we constitute what we call this one the menstrual cycle. The one which is happening only in the case of primates like human beings, chimpanzees, the monkeys, and also we have the lemurs and tarsiers. In the case of cows, or in the case of, for example, dogs or cats, in the case of small animal, rat, rabbits, etc., there is no menstrual cycle. The cycle is called as the estrous cycle. This is because of actually the heat period. There is no continuity. It is not happening through the year. It is happening only during the breeding season. At times of ovulation, the body temperature rises and making the animal or stimulating the animal ready for copulation. But here in the case of menstrual cycle, it is happening through the year. So the primates are ready to accept the coitus phenomenon at any stage through the year, but not in the case of that is estrous cycle as seen in the case of cow or any other animals.